Vladimir Putin has launched a new offensive in the north of Ukraine near the Kharkiv area. This could be a very decisive moment in this war. After 2.5 years or something close to that, this could be the moment to where either Putin overreaches and causes this war to expand even into an additional year, or if it's successful, it could result in bringing this war to a quicker end because it could break the Ukrainian military. That's where we're at right now. And it's right now, both of those things are possible. It's unclear at this point whether Putin is going to completely succeed or whether he has overreached and could then cause this whole cascading series of things to move back in the direction of the Ukraine. But if he has made the correct moves, if he has got the right resources in place and has good plans, then he could have launched an operation right now, which will ultimately, possibly within months, break the Ukrainian army. And just to underscore just how serious a lot of this stuff is, you can see that even the West, the BBC, is recognizing that there are some serious issues going on.
Now there's movement, and the Russians are pushing in, and the Ukrainians weren't ready, clearly, for this. The commander of the area has been replaced. A bit too late for that, perhaps. And it's not the Russian army that tried to march down the main road into Kiev in 2022 and got destroyed in the process. They've learned lessons. They've learned how to target their missiles and their drones to take advantage of Ukraine's very depleted air defenses. They're good at electronic warfare. And I think as well, they're learning that because of the wider problems Ukraine has had in terms of getting those American supplies, particularly, that were held up for a long time in Congress, that there's a window of opportunity now this year before that full flow of American-funded military aid can come in, and they seem to be taking advantage of it.
One of the key things about that clip you just said there underscores one of the real still big problems that the West is having, in that he said toward the end, they don't know if Ukraine can hang on until the supplies from America starts coming through. You're going to see this thing pop up here in just a minute. But here's the big misunderstanding of the West, and that includes the U.S. government as well as these commentators. They believe that once these materials that were passed in a $61 billion aid package come out and start flowing, that's going to make a difference on the battlefield. But as I talked about in our previous example, and I'm going to show you again here today, it's about manpower. Ukraine doesn't have the manpower, and Congress can't print and manufacture Ukrainian soldiers. They just don't have them. And the weapons that they have, it's not very many. It's not enough to tip the balance in any category. So that just shows you that the belief, the hope that Ukraine is going to turn this around is not well placed. But look, that's just a BBC. That's just an analyst on television. It gets much worse than that. As it turns out right now, as I'm making this video today, is that in Kiev, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is on the site with President Zelensky. And not long before we made this video, they went on together to try to put on a good face for this. A couple of things I want you to pay attention to here that he's saying, and also about the image it's cast. And we'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, check this out.
Of course, I want to discuss security guarantees, how our teams work on it, and peace summit, which is very important for us. We need participation, not only United States. We need we need President Biden, and also your help to involve as much as possible countries to peace summits, and I think a lot of things. You're very welcome.
Thank you. Well, Mr. President, thank you very, very much. And first, it's very good to be back in Ukraine. Very good to see you. I bring as well warm greetings from President Biden.
Thank you.
All of us admire your extraordinary resilience, your endurance, your strength, your leadership. And we know this is a challenging time, but we also know that in the near term, the assistance is now on the way. Some of it's already arrived. More of it will be arriving. And that's going to make a real difference against the ongoing Russian aggression on the battlefield. And we're determined, along with many other partners for Ukraine, to make sure that you succeed on the battlefield. We're equally determined that over time, Ukraine stands strongly on its own feet, militarily, economically, democratically. A strong, successful, thriving, free Ukraine is the best possible rebuke to Putin and the best possible guarantor for your future. And for all of that, the United States is and will remain a committed partner.
No, it's not. It's not. The best hope for a free Ukraine is not just hoping that they're a democracy and that things work out that way. Again, let me reiterate here. Wars don't give a crap about your form of government. They don't care about morality, right and wrong, anything else. When a bomb falls on the ground or on a target, it's going to blow up the target. If a bullet hits somebody, it's going to kill them. It doesn't care about right or wrong. And when you keep thinking that, just because we believe where our side is in the right, that's going to make a difference on the battlefield, you're setting yourself up for disaster, because it's cold, hard calculations about the fundamentals of combat power at the tactical, operational, and strategic level. And right now, everything is starting to collapse on the Ukrainian side because reality is imposing upon this spin. But the spin is not going to stop there. And in fact, you see how much of a spin that is. And I just got to point this out. I mean, instead of just putting this commentary between these two leaders out there, like, ordinarily just here's what they said, you see they try to make a production out of it to make it look really slick, almost like a scene from a movie. I mean, it really did. You could back the camera up again and watch it again if you want to, but you see it's more like a scene from a movie, which is bizarre. This is not a movie. This is, you can stage manage and craft and script everything those guys say, and you can't do that on the battlefield. And that's where one of our big problems is coming. We think we can script all this stuff, and we can't. And to see the continued theme of the fantasy, here was Blinken, I think the day before this, saying what his view is that where this war can go.
I'm convinced that Ukraine can effectively hold the line in the east. It can continue to press the advantage it's achieved for itself in the Black Sea, where it's getting as much out through the Black Sea, feeding the world, as it did before the Russian reinvasion of Ukraine, as well as to hold Russian forces at risk, including in Crimea, to make it more difficult for them to continue this aggression. We've been providing the systems to do that. But it's a challenging moment. We are not going anywhere, and neither are more than some 50 countries that are supporting Ukraine. That will continue, and if Putin thinks he can outlast Ukraine, outlast its supporters, he's wrong.
What is he talking about? Thinking that you could continue to put the Russians at risk, that you're going to continue to hold the lines? What do you mean continue? Everything that's been happening, not just in this Kharkiv operation, but everything that was going on in the Donbass before that, everything is moving in the Russian direction, meaning to the west. So the lines are starting to fall apart. And I'm going to give you a specific update on the northern part and how it's affecting the other parts in just a minute here. He knows these things. And for him to sit there and say that they're going to reverse, number one, that they're holding, is just in direct contradiction to what is visible on the ground. And I don't understand how they can continue to say these kinds of things when the evidence on the ground is starting to be really, really alarming. I mean, the clip I showed a minute ago of BBC should give you a real hint, because they've been very pro-Ukraine from the beginning, have been interpreting things positively all along. Now they're starting to admit that that's the case. You have their general, Syrskyi, Budanov, have openly claimed on television, in public, this is very serious, and they're really worried about this. So you have Zelensky and Blinken on the one hand trying to say everything's fine and we're going to keep going and that there's going to be a free and future. And you have the guys who were commanding on the front lines in Kharkiv admitting, hey, this is getting really trouble. I don't know what we can do to stop this. And, you're trying to move reserves around that you don't have, which causes cascading problems elsewhere, wherever they're pulling them from. But then you also, that was Blinken by himself. Here's Zelensky by himself, continuing on the fiction.
In the Kharkiv region, our counterattacks are ongoing. We've provided reinforcement in that area, in particular in Vovchansk and the border areas in general. Now we are getting more and more results, destroying the occupiers' infantry and machinery. I am grateful to all our warriors who are strictly following orders, holding their ground, and doing everything to stabilize the situation. At the same time, we understand the enemy's actions and their plan to divert our forces.
One of the reasons he specifically hails his forces who are following strict orders and fighting in place, because many of them aren't. Many of them have been running from their frontline positions. And there is a massive scandal going on right now inside Ukraine, within their government and in public, because The Russians have just been rolling across the border in many of these areas. Where are the defenses? They are supposed to have spent the last 12 months and billions of dollars the United States has already provided, and as well as Western Europe, for defenses which they've been claiming they've been building up. And where are they? The Russians have literally been walking across the border. They've been driving vehicles across the border, and then many of the border agents themselves have been fleeing. So to try to fix some of this stuff, you've had the Ukrainian generals try to start moving reserves up, especially from the Chasiv Yar area. And because they don't have entire brigades, meaning they don't have an operational reserve. They don't have brigades that are sitting out of contact that they can just now roll in. So they have to start taking it away from other areas at the front to try to stop this one here. But what that is doing is it making them weaker in the Chasiv Yar area in the eastern part of the war, and that's not enough to stop the ones in the northern part. So in the area, Gary, if you can throw that map up there real quick, you can see that on the map I'm going to show you here, you'll see Kharkiv in the lower left area there. There's about 20 some odd miles, I believe, from Kharkiv to that border. So the Russians have already gone between 5 and 7 kilometers deep already. Now that that's been expanded a little bit since we started making this video today from what I just saw. And the width has also expanded. Now it's about 20 kilometers wide and continuing to go down forth. In that city of Volchansk, which you see on the upper right-hand corner of the screen there, that's what Zelensky was talking about a second ago. The city is bisected by a river, and the Russians are about halfway through the northern part of that already. Because the Ukraine side doesn't have enough troops to stop that, they are now having to decide, and according to some reports inside Ukraine, their Commander-in-Chief Sersky is deciding whether he wants to send reinforcements up there to weaken Chasiv Yar, Kupiansk, and some of the other areas on the eastern part, or does he want to say, we're just going to let these guys do the best they can? Because he may be calculating, and at this point probably correctly, that Russia doesn't have enough troops to invest Kharkiv city. So if they just slow down the offensive, and if they can stop it in maybe 10, 12 kilometers further in, they may be able to hold the line there for a period of time, because Russia doesn't appear to have enough troops to take the city. The Kharkiv city is 1 million people, by the way. Chasiv Yar is only 12,000, and it's taken Russia months to be able to move through that city. So he may be calculating that they're just going to have to leave them on their own, the guys in Volchansk in that area, which is a terrible thing. If you're a soldier, to know that you're not going to have any reserves. You see the president of the country telling you, stand and fight to the death, and that way it'll only lose a little bit slower. That doesn't give you a lot of motivation to want to keep on fighting and sacrificing your life when you're not even fighting for victory anymore. You're just fighting to maybe slow down the loss. Not many people I know want to throw their lives away for that kind of an environment here, but that's kind of where we are. And then now that there's also reports from just hours ago that there's another Russian area in the Sumy area, which is a little to the left of that map that I showed you a second ago. You see that bulge there in the upper left-hand corner that where it kind of goes up. That's the Sumy area, and there's reports that there is additional artillery and FAB aerial bombs have been going on there, and that they're amassing troops on the border there. If Russia opens yet another portion of attack in that northern area, there's definitely no more reserves to throw away. So the question is going to be, then what is Ukraine going to do? Are they going to just say, we're just going to surrender part of this, and we're going to remove our troops down to reinforce areas so that we put our troops where we can defend? Or did they try to defend everything and then end up being weak everywhere? And that is a horrible dilemma, but that's one they're facing right now. If Ukraine tries to defend everything all over the place, they don't have as many men as Russia does, and Russia's going to be able to probably break through at some point. But that shifts me over to one other area I want to talk about, which is at the top of this. I said this is a big gamble for Russia, for Vladimir Putin, because there is a lot on the line here. If Russia is able to, with this new front here, to break through and even get into the area to surround Kharkiv city, and if the Ukrainian army breaks, the war could literally be over within months. I've been saying I think it's a 50-50 chance that the Ukraine army breaks by the end of the summer, but this could actually speed that up because the pressure is just relentless all across the front lines right now. But really, it all depends on what Russia's advance or what their intentions are. And right now, it's not clear. And I want to just kind of cover across some of the things that they're looking at right now, some of the things that we're looking at to try and see if we can divine what Russia's attempts are, because there's a number of possibilities. It could just be, which we talked about in one of our, I think, the first video, because Vladimir Putin did say that he wants to have a buffer between the northern part of Ukraine and his southern border, because that's where so many people in Belgorod, et cetera. You just saw this big attack that they had the other day, that the Ukrainians, where they blew up a multi-story apartment building. And that's making a lot of the Russian people unhappy. So it puts a lot of pressure on him to move this buffer south. It could just be what that is, meaning that they may not be planning to go to Kharkiv city at this point, just to have a buffer so that they can push far enough away so that Ukraine lines are not in artillery range of the Belgorod city, and that the Russian forces are in artillery range of the Kharkiv city. So now that the tables would have been completely reversed. Maybe that's all he's doing right now. It could also be that Putin wants to put Kharkiv under threat so that Syrskyi is forced with having to pull some of these reserves on. By some reports, it appears that some Ukrainian forces have been pulled out of Chasiv Yar in the east, and that today Russia has been making more advances in that area. So right now it appears that there has been some movement in that direction. So that's been somewhat successful. But it could also be that Putin wants to push forces further, because so far, as I told you, these initial forces from Russia appear to be reconnaissance in force operations, meaning they're designed to find out where the defensive lines are strong, where they're weak, so that the main forces, which have yet to be inserted into battle, can then enter from a position of strength, and they only go after the weak points of the enemy as opposed to where the strong points are, because the defenses clearly are not uniform, so the reconnaissance forces would identify where those points are. If that happens, they could break through, and then they don't have enough forces to take the city. They simply don't. But they do have enough forces potentially to encircle the city. If they cut off the lines, especially in Sumy, where the rail networks come across there, by which Ukraine uses primarily to reinforce and provide supplies for all their forces in the northern part of the sector and the Kharkiv. If they cut that off, then if they come across on the other side and isolate them completely, they could split the Ukrainian forces in the north between the Kupiansk area and in the Kharkiv area, and then force another dilemma on the Ukrainian command to where they may have to withdraw the entire northern portion of their forces or risk getting them cut off, and then they could literally lose tens of thousands of troops. All of that is still possible. So there's many things that Putin is doing which could break the Ukrainian side. Here's the problem, though. If he doesn't succeed, if Russia started to go on this and all of a sudden this offensive bogs down, the way the Ukrainian offensive bogged down in 2023, that could give enormous boost psychologically to Zelensky, to his troops, to the Western supporters who right now are not wanting to give a lot more money, ammunition, or supplies, because they see the same thing I do, that all the trends are going against Ukraine. So their thought is, why give more stuff to just watch Ukraine lose slower if it's not going to change the outcome? And everything they see on the battlefield validates that. But if Putin overreaches and he doesn't have enough troops to continue this operation, if he doesn't have enough supplies, ammunition, artillery, aerial bombs, all those kinds of things, and he bogs down, then that could make the people in the West go, oh, wait, maybe there is a chance. And then that could reinforce, and now some people are willing to give more and more ammunition, which could delay the war, who knows, a long time, maybe well into 2025. But of course, now, listen, I'll tell you the whole thing. It won't change the dynamics of the war, because the overwhelming capacity of Russia, which is really highlighted by the fact they had this new minister of defense who was specifically brought on board to help streamline the military industrial complex there and to create even more of an imbalance between the West and Russia right now, the cumulative West with Ukraine. So over time, there's just no way that they can do, even if this operation fails for Russia, it won't change the ultimate outcome, because the balances are just off the charts in Russia's favor. But it could cause this to be over quicker. And I think that right now, at least according to what we've seen there, is that the American leaders, at least publicly, the Ukrainian leaders, at least publicly, aren't believing that. They're just choosing to stick with the fantasy. And, I got to show you one last piece of fantasy before we let you go today, because it's just just anguishing to watch. General Ben Hodges, continues to not worry about any kind of results. He keeps thinking we're still going to turn this around. All the times that he's been dead wrong on this. Remember, he said the U.S. would be in Crimea by this August of 2023. Even after he saw their offensive fail, he just kept on going with that fiction. And even with all the stuff that's going on right now, I guess he's still consistently peddler of fiction.
We should stop being deterred by our own unfounded fear that Russia might somehow use a nuclear weapon. I think it's very, very unlikely. What is likely to happen is, because we don't commit to helping Ukraine win, is that this war is just going to keep going and going and going. While it may not be escalated, it will be elongated. It will go on longer than it should.
What does he mean if we don't support Ukraine? I mean, has he not looked at the sheet of things that we've given him? The hundreds of billions of dollars, both the U.S. and the West, now the $61 billion, and I guarantee you another package is going to be requested within months from now. I mean, where does it all end? And at what point do people like Hodges, like Jack Keane, like Lindsey Graham, recognize patently obvious realities that all of these things they've been claiming are simply untrue? Why do you want to keep throwing more resources at something that can't succeed? And why are you oblivious to all of the Ukrainian men who are dying for no purpose to defend their country when they can't succeed? Why does no one care about the people of Ukraine? Or now that you see Volchansk, it's getting just obliterated like all these other cities. And everything they move further, it's going to continue to suffer that same result. If Russia moves in and starts hitting Kharkiv, this centuries-old city is going to start to be pulverized as well. Why subject it to that? Why subject the people to that? The troops, all this kind of thing. It makes total sense to recognize reality and reach a negotiated settlement is the best terms you can. But listen, I mean, I've been advocating that forever. You hear me. But there's now growing doubt, especially if Putin does have the resources. Because right now, I don't know how many troops he has in reserve. I don't know how many theater operational troops he has, how much stockpiles of ammunition and bullets and bombs and aerial bombs, all those kind of things that he has. If he has enough, and only he knows, he may be extremely confident and have no interest in stopping the war now until he has captured Kharkiv, possibly Odessa, and cut off the entire access to the Black Sea. Those are the things that are at risk right now. So even if they did what I suggested right now, if Blinken was in Kiev and told him, instead of what he said, hey, dude, this ain't happening, it's time to reach negotiated settlement. Even if he did that, it's unclear right now if Putin is going to do it. He may say, I'll talk to you once we finish taking these cities. That's an entirely possibility. But if we don't even try, all we're doing is condemning more Ukrainian men to death, and it's going to make it even harder for them to recover in the future. It's time to stop the fantasy and start prioritizing the people whose lives we claim we want to defend, and start doing things that make sense for American national security as well. That time should have been made a long time ago, but there's not going to be a better one than now. The longer we wait, the worse it's going to be for everyone. And that'll be it.